Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel General Hospital today. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the polished concrete floor of the warehouse, turning the space into a canvas of elongated darkness and sharp, orange light. Jason Morgan stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the shipping manifest spread across the metal desk. But his mind was 1,000 miles away, or perhaps just a few blocks, at the Quartermaine mansion where his wife, Carly, was preparing for another one of her infamous charity galas. He had promised he would be there, suited and booted, playing the part of the respectable, if notoriously connected, businessman. The thought made the back of his neck itch. It wasn't the suit he minded, it was the performance. The smiling, the small talk, the veiled insults disguised as pleasantries from people who would cross the street to avoid him on any other day. A soft knock at the reinforced steel door broke his reverie. Before he could call out, the door swung open and Ronnie O'Hanlon stepped inside, his familiar, lopsided grin in place. "Hey boss. Just finished the sweep of the new dockside property. Clean as a whistle. No unwanted listeners," Ronnie announced, patting the small electronic device in his breast pocket that was used for detecting bugs. Jason gave a curt nod. "Good. Thanks, Ronnie." Ronnie lingered, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He was a solid man, built like a retired boxer, with a face that was both friendly and capable of turning stern in a heartbeat. He'd been a solid, if recent, addition to Jason's security team. A former PI from Buffalo, or so he said, with a knack for electronics and a no-nonsense attitude that Jason appreciated. He was reliable, he asked few questions and he followed orders. In their world, that was as good as a gold-plated reference. "Big shindig at the Quartermaines tonight, huh?" Ronnie said, leaning against the doorframe. "You heading over?" "Soon," Jason said, his voice a low rumble. He began stacking the manifests, his movements efficient and economical. "You're on duty here until midnight. Double-check the perimeter sensors. I've been getting a few false alerts." "You got it, boss. Not a mouse will squeak without me knowing about it." Ronnie's smile was easy, genuine. "Don't worry about a thing here. You go enjoy, well, as much as anyone can enjoy rubbing elbows with that crowd." Jason offered a ghost of a smile in return. It was the kind of comment that cemented Ronnie's place as one of the guys. He understood the dynamics of Port Charles, the unspoken lines between the old money, the corporate sharks, and the more direct street-level power that Jason represented. An hour later, Jason was standing in the grand ballroom of the Quartermaine mansion, a crystal flute of champagne feeling alien and frivolous in his hand. He'd done his duty, greeting Carly with a kiss that had drawn a few appreciative sighs from onlookers, shaking hands with Ned, enduring a barbed comment from Tracy. Now, he'd found a relatively quiet alcove near a floor-to-ceiling window, using the curtain as a partial shield from the cacophony of the party. Carly materialized beside him, a vision in emerald green. "Hiding," she murmured, her lips brushing his ear. "Observing," he corrected softly. "Well, observe this," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "See Senator Lewis over by the ice sculpture? The one trying to look interested in whatever it is Brooklyn is saying." Jason's eyes flicked across the room. Senator Lewis was a portly man with a carefully cultivated head of silver hair, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was a frequent guest at these events, a man who enjoyed the proximity to wealth and power, even its criminal variants, as long as it was sanitized by black tie and champagne. "What about him?" Jason asked. "I overheard him talking to his aide," Carly said, her eyes sparkling with mischief and intrigue. "He's in a panic about some old case. Something from his early days as a state prosecutor. He's afraid it's going to be dredged up before his re-election campaign. Something about a protected witness who disappeared." Jason felt a familiar prickle of caution, the one that always preceded trouble. "What does that have to do with us?" "Probably nothing," Carly admitted with a shrug. "But he was saying the witness's name was Angelo Miranova. Something Italian. The point is, the witness was supposed to testify against a mid-level mobster, but he vanished the night before the trial. Poof. Gone. The case collapsed. Lewis always believed the witness was either paid off or silenced, but he said the method was too clean. Not the usual messy style of the family they were up against. He said it was professional, almost clinical. Jason absorbed the information. Old history. It was the silt at the bottom of Port Charles's river, constantly stirred up, never truly settling. It was unlikely to affect them, but in his position any ripple was worth noting. "I'll have someone look into it," he said, more to placate her than out of any real concern. "You're so good to me," Carly teased, squeezing his arm before gliding back into the throng. A social butterfly with a will of steel. The party wore on. Jason exchanged a few terse words with Sonny, who was holding court near the bar, and shared a look of mutual understanding with Sam, a silent acknowledgement of a complicated past. It was as he was making his excuses, ready to return to the more honest confines of the warehouse, that he passed by Senator Lewis again. The senator was now deep in conversation with a man Jason recognized as a senior editor from the Port Charles Press. "No, the file is sealed, of course," Lewis was saying, his voice a low, anxious hum. "But the alias the witness was using in the program, it's always stuck with me. So ordinary. So forgettable. Ronnie Shaw. I mean, you could meet 100 Ronnie Shaws and never remember a single one." Jason stopped dead. The name was a dull thud in his mind. Ronnie Shaw. It meant nothing to him. And yet, it echoed with a strange, dissonant frequency. Ronnie. He shook his head, dismissing it as coincidence. Ronnie was a common name. So was Shaw. He continued walking, the senator's worries fading behind him, but a tiny cold seed of doubt had been planted. The warehouse was silent when he returned, the only sound the low hum of the industrial refrigerator in the small kitchenette. Ronnie was at the desk, scrolling through the live feed from the perimeter cameras. "All quiet, boss," he said without looking up. "Just a raccoon that set off the east sensor. Took care of the sensitivity on that one." "Good," Jason said, shrugging off his suit jacket. He hung it carefully on a hook by the door. The name Ronnie Shaw buzzed in his head like a trapped fly. He looked at the man in front of him. Ronnie O'Hanlon. Solid. Dependable. He'd vetted him himself, as much as one could vet a man with a seemingly clean, if slightly murky past. There were no red flags. Just gaps. Gaps that were, in their line of work, not uncommon. "Ronnie," Jason began, his tone casual. "You ever go by any other name? A middle name? Nickname?" Ronnie looked up, his expression one of mild curiosity. "Not really. My mom hated my old man, so she never gave me a junior. Just Ronnie." "Why?" "Just doing some paperwork. Wanted to make sure it was consistent." Jason lied smoothly. "Nope. Ronnie Michael O'Hanlon. That's the whole package." He grinned again, that easy, trustworthy grin. "Boring, I know." Jason nodded, seemingly satisfied. But the seed of doubt had sprouted a tiny, questing root. Boring. Forgettable. Like Ronnie Shaw. He decided to let it go. He was jumping at shadows, seeing conspiracies where there were none. Paranoia was a tool of the trade, but unchecked it became a liability. The next few days passed with a tense normalcy. Business was conducted. Meetings were held. Threats were assessed and neutralized. But Jason found his eyes lingering on Ronnie a little longer, noting small things he'd previously dismissed as quirks. The way Ronnie always positioned himself with his back to a wall, his eyes constantly doing a slow, systematic sweep of any room he entered. It was professional practice, yes, but it was more than that. It was the ingrained habit of someone who had lived with a heightened sense of threat for a very long time. Then there was his proficiency with technology. It was advanced beyond what a standard PI would usually need. It was military grade almost. The breaking point came on Thursday. Jason was in the back office, going over the financials for a new legitimate import-export business he was setting up as a front. He needed his passport for the incorporation documents. Rummaging through the small fireproof safe bolted to the floor, he found it tucked under a stack of bonds. As he pulled it out, a faded, creased photograph fluttered out and landed face down on the concrete. He picked it up. It was an old picture of him and his late best friend, Michael Corinthos, taken on a fishing boat years ago, before the world had turned so dark and complicated. He turned it over, a pang of old grief hitting him squarely in the chest. And that's when he saw it. On the back, in Michael's sloppy handwriting, was a caption. "Me and Jace hauling in the big one. Off the coast of Shaw Island, 2004. Shaw." The name seemed to leap off the paper, a stark black accusation. Ronnie Shaw. The coincidence was now a screaming siren in his mind. Two unrelated mentions of the name Shaw in such a short span, connected to a story about a vanished witness and linked to the man now serving as his head of security. It was too much. This was no longer paranoia. This was a pattern. He needed to know. He needed proof. He waited until Ronnie was out on a supply run. The moment the warehouse door clicked shut, Jason was at Ronnie's workstation. The computer was password protected, but Jason had ways around that. He plugged in a small custom-built device that ran a brute force decryption algorithm. While it worked, he went through the drawers. They were meticulously organized. Spare cables, tools, a box of ammunition, a first aid kit. Nothing out of the ordinary. He was about to give up when his fingers brushed against a false bottom in the lowest drawer. It was a classic hide, almost too classic to be believed. He pried it up with his pocket knife. Beneath it lay a single sealed manila envelope. There was no name on it. His heart hammered against his ribs, a slow, heavy beat. He slid his finger under the flap and broke the seal. Inside was a birth certificate. For Ronald Michael Shaw. Born in Rochester, New York. The date was right. But the document felt wrong. The paper, the font. He was no expert, but in his line of work, he'd seen his share of forged documents. This had the hallmarks of a very good but very fake ID. Beneath that was a driver's license from New Jersey, also in the name of Shaw, with a photo of a younger, leaner Ronnie. And then, at the bottom of the envelope, was a single, grainy, black and white photograph. It was a surveillance shot taken from a distance. It showed a younger Ronnie, or Shaw, standing on a street corner, handing a thick envelope to a man whose face was partially obscured. But Jason would know that profile, that posture anywhere. It was Frank Smith, a ruthless mobster who had been a thorn in Sonny's side for years before his eventual violent demise. The pieces, jagged and sharp, began to click into a horrifying picture. Ronnie Shaw. A protected witness. A man who had vanished. A man who had been dealing with Frank Smith. A man who was now, under the name O'Hanlon, embedded deep within Jason's organization, with access to every secret, every vulnerability, every move they made. The decryption program on the computer chimed, signaling it had bypassed the password. Jason's hands were steady as he navigated the file system. He found hidden partitions, encrypted folders. He used the tools on Ronnie's own computer to break into them. He found bank records tracing back years with large untraceable deposits from shell companies that Jason knew were fronts for Frank Smith's empire. He found scan documents, the original witness protection agreement for Angelo Mironova, aka Ronnie Shaw. He had been a bookkeeper for the organization Smith was prosecuting. He had flipped, and then it seemed, he had double-crossed the feds, selling his testimony to the highest bidder, Frank Smith himself. Ronnie Shaw hadn't been silenced. He had been purchased. And he had been placed. But why here? Why now, years after Frank Smith's death? The final piece of the puzzle was in an encrypted journal file. Jason opened it. It was less a diary and more a log of activities. Assignment: infiltrate the Morgan organization. Objective: gain trust. Map operations. Identify key vulnerabilities. Await further instruction. The most recent entry was from a week ago. The old man is getting nervous. Lewis is making noise. The past is stirring. Contingency plans may be necessary. The asset is fully integrated. Trust is absolute. The trigger can be pulled at any time. Jason sat back in the chair, the cold, hard truth settling over him like a shroud. The trust had been absolute. He had let a viper into his home, his business, his inner circle. Ronnie had not been a loyal employee. He was a sleeper agent, a weapon placed years ago by a dead man, but whose purpose was clearly still very much alive. He was there to destroy Jason from the inside out. And the trigger was about to be pulled. The sound of a key in the warehouse door lock snapped him back to the present. He quickly closed all the files, resealed the envelope, and placed it back in the hiding spot, sliding the false bottom into place just as the door swung open. Ronnie walked in, carrying a box of electronic components. "Hey boss. Got the new comms units. They're the top-of-the-line models, just like you wanted. He stopped, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second as he saw Jason standing by his desk. Everything okay? Jason's face was a mask of impenetrable calm. He had spent a lifetime mastering his expressions, locking his emotions away behind a wall of ice. Now that skill was more vital than ever. Fine, Jason said, his voice even. Just wanted to check the feed from the docks. Thought I saw something on the remote monitor. Oh. Ronnie's eyes darted almost imperceptibly to his computer screen, then back to Jason. Anything I should be concerned about? No. It was nothing. A trick of the light. Jason walked towards him, his steps measured. He stopped a few feet away, his blue eyes locking onto Ronnie's. He could see it now, the subtle shift behind the man's affable demeanor, the calculation, the watchfulness, the lie. You know, Ronnie, Jason said, his tone deceptively conversational. I was thinking about what you said. About your name. Ronnie O'Hanlon. It's a good strong name. Ronnie's smile returned, but it was tighter now. A little less sure. Yeah, well, it served me okay. It has, Jason agreed. He took another step closer, closing the distance. The air in the warehouse grew thick, charged with unspoken threat. But I have to ask you one more time, just to be absolutely clear. Are you sure? You've never gone by any other name? The change in Ronnie's face was instantaneous. The friendly mask dissolved, leaving behind something cold, hard, and dangerous. The man Jason had known as Ronnie O'Hanlon was gone, replaced by the ghost of Ronnie Shaw. The smile vanished and his eyes, once warm and crinkled at the corners, were now flat and dead like chips of slate. I think you already know the answer to that question, Jason, Ronnie said, his voice losing its folksy cadence, becoming clipped and precise. Angelo Mironova, Jason stated, the name hanging in the air between them like a verdict. Ronnie didn't flinch. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. I'm impressed. How did you figure it out? It doesn't matter, Jason said. What matters is why you're here. Frank Smith is dead. His empire is dust. So who are you working for now? A slow, ugly smile spread across Ronnie's face. Frank Smith had partners. Ambitious partners. They didn't appreciate the way Sonny carved up his territory. They've been waiting, rebuilding. You and Corinthos, you're the last pieces on the board. Remove you and the path is clear. So this was always the plan? Infiltrate and wait. Patience is a virtue, Ronnie shrugged. I'm a patient man. I built a life, a cover. I waited for the call. It came 6 months ago. He took a small step back, his body coiling, ready for a fight. You're smarter than they gave you credit for, Morgan. But it's too late. Is it? Jason asked, his voice dangerously soft. You've been feeding them information. You know our routes, our schedules, our safe houses. But you don't know everything. And you're not going to get the chance to report this. Ronnie laughed, a dry, humorless sound. What are you going to do? You're a businessman now, Jason. Or have you forgotten? You're surrounded by legitimate enterprises. You can't just make me disappear. You disappeared once before, Jason pointed out. You're good at it. Maybe it's time for you to do it again. I'm done running, Ronnie snarled, his hand twitching towards the gun holstered under his arm. But Jason was faster. He'd been anticipating the move since the moment Ronnie walked in the door. He lunged forward, not for Ronnie's gun, but for the man himself. He slammed into him, driving him back against the metal shelving units with a deafening crash. Boxes of components rained down around them. Ronnie was strong and he was trained. He drove a knee into Jason's side, followed by a sharp, short jab to his kidney. Pain flared white-hot, but Jason absorbed it, his focus absolute. He grabbed Ronnie's wrist, twisting it until the bones creaked, forcing him to drop the gun he'd managed to half-draw. It clattered to the concrete and skittered away under a pallet. They grappled, a brutal, silent dance of violence. There were no shouted threats, no dramatic declarations. This was pure, efficient combat. Ronnie fought with the desperate fury of a cornered animal, his moves dirty and effective. He smashed a fist into Jason's jaw, and Jason tasted blood. But Jason's strength, honed by a lifetime of conflict, was overwhelming. He blocked a knife-hand strike, caught Ronnie's arm, and using his own momentum, spun him around and slammed him face-first into the edge of the metal desk. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage. Ronnie staggered back, blood pouring from his ruined nose, his breath coming in ragged, wet gasps. He stared at Jason with pure, undiluted hatred. "They'll come for you," he spat, blood spraying from his lips. "Even without me they'll come. You're a dead man walking, Morgan." Jason didn't answer. He advanced, his expression unchanged. The time for talk was over. Ronnie made a final desperate lunge for a metal pipe that had fallen from the shelving. As he bent down, Jason was on him. He wrapped an arm around Ronnie's neck, applying pressure with ruthless precision. Ronnie thrashed, his legs kicking, his fingers clawing at Jason's forearm. But the hold was unbreakable. After a minute that felt like an eternity, the struggle ceased. Ronnie's body went limp. Jason held the choke for a few seconds longer, ensuring the man was unconscious, not dead. Killing him would be easy, satisfying even, but a body created problems, questions, loose ends. An alive Ronnie Shaw, a known traitor and infiltrator, was an asset. He was a source of information. He was a message. He released his hold, letting Ronnie slump to the floor. He stood over him, breathing heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The warehouse was silent again. The only evidence of the struggle, the overturned boxes and the spatter of blood on the concrete. He pulled out his phone and hit a speed dial number. It was answered on the first ring. "Yeah." Sonny Corinthos's voice was sharp, alert. "We have a problem," Jason said, his voice calm, though his knuckles were white where he gripped the phone. "A big one." "It's Ronnie." There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Ronnie? My Ronnie?" Sonny asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "He's not who we thought he was," Jason said, his eyes fixed on the unconscious form at his feet. "He's a plant. From the Smith era. His name is Ronnie Shaw. He was a protected witness who flipped and sold out to Frank Smith. He was placed here to take us down." Sonny's curse was long and vicious. "Is he alive?" "For now," Jason said. "He has information. About their plans. Their people.